My Aunt Marcella pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me across the dining room table, her voice dripping with pity. Lyndon, sweetie, let's be realistic. College isn't for everyone. You're just not built for it. The words were a slap, but the real wound was the silence that followed. My own parents, sitting right next to me, just stared down at their plates, refusing to meet my eyes. Have you ever been made to feel so small by the people who are supposed to build you up? To have your biggest dream publicly dismissed as a childish fantasy? They thought that night broke me. They thought they had put me in my place for good. They had no idea it was the night I started building my empire. The dining room at my Aunt Marcella's house wasn't just a room, it was a stage for her to perform the role of the benevolent, wealthy matriarch. The mahogany table was so polished you could see the distorted reflection of the crystal chandelier in its surface. The chairs were upholstered in a heavy brocaded fabric that probably cost more than my car. The air smelled of roasted duck and money. And tonight, the star of the show was my cousin, Jasper. He sat beside his mother, basking in the warm glow of familial adoration. He'd just been accepted into the same Ivy League university his father had attended, and the entire dinner was an altar built in his honor. To Jasper, my uncle boomed, raising his wine glass. Following in his father's footsteps. We're so proud of you, son. A chorus of to Jasper echoed around the table. I lifted my water glass with a weak smile. I was proud of him, I guess. It was hard to tell through the thick fog of condescension that always seemed to drift my way whenever the family gathered. They all knew I was working as a waitress at a 24-hour diner, my shifts a mix of sticky syrup and the smell of burnt coffee. To them, my life was a cautionary tale, a stark contrast to Jasper's shining, pre-paved path to success. My mother, Susan, caught my eye for a fraction of a second, her expression a familiar blend of pity and anxiety, before her gaze darted away. My father, David, was busy listening intently to my uncle talk about alumni donations. They were good at that, my parents, fading into the background, becoming part of the expensive wallpaper. I knew why, of course. My aunt and uncle held the mortgage to their modest house. Every polite nod, every forced smile, was an interest payment on their security. And I was a liability. The conversation lulled, and in that dangerous quiet, my Aunt Marcella turned her attention to me. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over my simple dress. "And what about you, Lyndon?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "We're all so thrilled for Jasper, but we mustn't forget you. What are your little plans these days?" Her use of the word little was a surgical strike. It was designed to diminish whatever I said next before I even said it. I felt my hands grow damp under the table. My heart started to beat a little faster. But this was it. This was my chance. I'd been working on this idea for months, sketching it out in notebooks during my breaks, researching it late at night when I couldn't sleep. I took a deep breath. "Actually, I've been working on something I'm really passionate about," I began, my voice a little shaky. "I'm saving up to launch an online platform. It's for non-traditional students, people who have to work full-time, or parents who can't just drop everything and go to a campus. It would offer accredited preparatory courses to help them get ready for college, to earn credits they can transfer." I could feel the passion bubbling up, making my words come faster. So many people get left behind because they think it's too late or too expensive. I want to build a bridge for them. I want to make higher education accessible to everyone, not just I trailed off, realizing I was about to say, not just for people like Jasper. There was a moment of silence. I looked around the table, a flicker of hope in my chest. Maybe they'd see it. Maybe they'd understand. Then, Marcella laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a loud, theatrical, head-thrown-back laugh. It filled the entire room, bouncing off the polished wood and crystal. Jasper joined in with a low, cruel smirk. The sound was like glass shattering inside my chest. When she finally recovered, she wiped a tear of mirth from the corner of her eye with a perfectly manicured finger. She leaned forward, placing her hand on her husband's arm as if for support. "Oh, Lyndon, sweetie," she sighed, her voice now dripping with a thick, cloying pity that was 1,000 times worse than the laughter. "Let's be realistic. College isn't for everyone. You're just not built for it. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. She wasn't finished. It's a wonderful thought, dear, but these things are for experts. It takes a certain kind of mind. Perhaps you should focus on something more practical. A good receptionist is always in demand. You have a lovely smile. Jasper, ever his mother's echo, chimed in. Yeah, Laurie, stick to what you're good at, like taking orders. He winked at me, as if we were sharing a private joke. My vision tunneled. The room, the food, the faces. They all blurred at the edges. The only thing I could see clearly was my parents. I looked at my mother, my eyes pleading with her. Say something, please, defend me. She stared intently at a spot on the tablecloth, her lips pressed into a thin white line. I turned to my father. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just picked up his fork, his hand trembling slightly, and nervously cleared his throat. So that duck is just fantastic, isn't it? He said to no one in particular. And that was it. The silence. Their silence was the real betrayal. It was a confirmation of everything Marcella had said. In their eyes, I was a failure, a useless dreamer, a nobody. A hot, prickly shame washed over me. I felt the burn of tears behind my eyes, and I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound was jarring in the sudden quiet. Excuse me, I mumbled, my voice tight. I'm not feeling well. I turned and walked out of the dining room, my back straight, my head held high. I could feel all their eyes on me. As I reached the front hall, I heard Marcella's voice, a stage whisper that was meant for me to hear. Poor thing, she's just so sensitive. Then I heard their laughter start up again, a low rumble that followed me out the front door and into the cold night air. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally put me in my place. But as the cold air hit my face, the tears of shame turned into something else. They turned into fuel. I didn't go home to my tiny, lonely apartment. The thought of sitting there, surrounded by the four walls of my failure, was unbearable. Instead, I drove my beat-up sedan, the one that always smelled faintly of gasoline, straight to the 24-hour diner where I worked. The familiar fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee felt more like home than my aunt's gilded cage. It was late, and the place was nearly empty. Just a couple of truckers hunched over their mugs and my coworker, Maria, wiping down the counter. She saw my face and her friendly smile faltered. Hey, honey. You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost. Worse, I said, sliding into a worn vinyl booth. I saw my family. She just nodded, understanding in her eyes. She poured me a coffee without me having to ask, and left me alone. I sat there, the hot mug warming my cold hands, the humiliation from the dinner party churning in my stomach like sour milk. Marcella's words echoed in my head. Not built for it. Stick to what you're good at. Poor thing. They were meant to break me, to file down my ambitions until they were small and manageable and no longer a threat to her perfect world order. For a moment, I let the despair wash over me. Maybe she was right. Who was I, a waitress with a high school diploma and a mountain of debt, to think I could build something important? Who was I to dream of changing the world of education? The weight of it felt crushing. My parents' silence was the heaviest part. Their refusal to defend me felt like a verdict, guilty of being a disappointment. But then, something else began to bubble up from beneath the hurt. It was a hot, sharp, and surprisingly clean feeling. It was anger, a furious, white-hot rage. How dare they? How dare they laugh at my dream? How dare they decide my worth and dismiss me like a child? The anger was a fire, and it burned away the tears. I looked around the empty diner. I saw the truckers, their faces lined with exhaustion. I thought of Maria, working 2 jobs to put her son through community college. I thought of all the people out there who had been told, in one way or another, that they weren't good enough, that their dreams were unrealistic. People who didn't have a rich uncle to pay their way. People like me. My dream wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a mission. I reached across the table and grabbed a stack of thin paper napkins. I pulled a pen from my purse. The first lines I drew were shaky, fueled by adrenaline, but as I kept going, my hands steadied, the anger morphed into a focused, furious energy. I wasn't just sketching, I was building. Right there on a flimsy napkin that smelled of grease and sugar, I laid the foundation of my empire. I drew a box for the user login. I mapped out the dashboard. I listed the course categories: Math Foundations, Academic Writing, Critical Thinking 101. Beside each one, I scribbled notes, gamified quizzes, progress trackers, peer support forums. I designed the flow, from the moment a user signed up to the moment they earned their first certificate. The credit transfer system was the most complex part. I drew arrows and diagrams, figuring out how to create a standardized transcript that partner colleges would accept. I was no longer the girl who had been laughed out of a dining room. I was an architect, a planner, a founder. It sounds crazy, right? Going from waitress to tech nerd overnight. But every line I drew felt like forging a piece of armor. Every feature I imagined was a brick in the wall I was building around myself, a fortress where their words couldn't reach me. I filled a dozen napkins, front and back, until the sun started to rise, casting a pale gray light through the diner's windows. Maria came by to refill my coffee, looking at the mess of napkins spread across my table. "Building a rocket ship?" she asked with a small smile. "Something like that," I replied, a real smile touching my lips for the first time all night. That morning was the beginning. I spent the next few weeks living a double life. By day, I was Lyndon the waitress, smiling and pouring coffee. But by night, I was Lyndon the researcher, the student, the entrepreneur. I spent my breaks at the public library, using their computers because the internet at my apartment was too slow. I typed in search terms I barely understood at first: how to code a basic website, how to write a business plan, how to apply for nonprofit grants. My world filled with new words: scalability, user acquisition, intellectual property. I knew I couldn't afford a real education, so I pieced one together myself. I signed up for every free online course I could find, watching lectures on business management and basic programming until my eyes burned. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. But I was driven by a new kind of energy. The memory of my aunt's laugh was a constant sharp prod, pushing me forward. I needed seed money, even a tiny amount. I looked around my small apartment. I had nothing of value, except for one thing: my grandmother's locket. It was a small gold oval with a tiny sapphire chip, and inside were two faded pictures of her and my grandfather. It was the only truly beautiful thing I owned. Selling it felt like a betrayal. It felt like selling a piece of my past. But I held it in my hand and thought about my future. I thought about building something that would last longer than a piece of jewelry. The next day, I walked into a pawn shop and walked out with $300 in cash. The weight of the locket was gone from my neck, but a new, heavier weight of responsibility settled in its place. I immediately used the money to enroll in a certified online course for project management. It was a real, tangible step, the first of many. I was no longer dreaming on a napkin. I was building. I hit a wall 2 months into my feverish new life. I had a solid business plan, a detailed feature list, and a prototype I'd clumsily built using a drag-and-drop website builder. It was functional, but it was ugly and clunky. More importantly, I had stumbled into a maze I couldn't navigate alone: the world of academic accreditation. I could build the most beautiful platform in the world, but if the courses weren't recognized by real colleges, it was all just a glorified hobby. Exactly what my aunt had called it. My nights were now spent reading dense, jargon-filled documents from regional accrediting bodies. It was like trying to read a foreign language. I was a waitress, not a university provost. The frustration was immense. I'd sit in front of my laptop, the screen glowing in my dark apartment, feeling the familiar tendrils of doubt creeping back in. Marcella was right: this is for experts, you're in over your head. But the anger was still there, a pilot light, burning deep inside me. I refused to let her win. If I couldn't become an expert overnight, I had to find one. I started digging, not for business partners or investors, but for an academic, someone who knew this world inside and out, someone who understood its politics and its pitfalls. My research led me down a rabbit hole of university archives and old news articles. That's how I found the name Dr. Eris Kaplan. 15 years ago, Dr. Kaplan had been a rising star at Northwood University, the big, prestigious school in our city. He was a brilliant sociology professor, lauded for his innovative teaching methods and his passion for educational access. An old article from the university newspaper called him a visionary. He had been developing a program eerily similar to my own idea, a bridge program for underserved communities. And then, he just disappeared. His name vanished from the faculty roster. There were no new publications, no new lectures. It was as if he had ceased to exist. It took me another week of deep dive searching to find the ghost of a story. A small buried article in a local business journal mentioned a lawsuit. Dr. Kaplan had partnered with a new, aggressive ed tech corporation to bring his program to life. They had taken his research, his curriculum, his entire intellectual framework, and then pushed him out with a handful of legal threats and a paltry settlement. They stole his life's work and left him ruined and discredited. He was perfect. He was a wounded mentor. He understood the dream, and he understood the betrayal. Finding him in the present day was another challenge entirely. He wasn't listed anywhere. No social media, no university email. It was a long shot, but I cross-referenced his name with public employment records and found a match that made my heart sink. Eris Kaplan, part-time employee, City of Northwood Public Library System. The Central Library was a grand old building with soaring ceilings and echoing marble floors. It smelled of old paper and quiet ambition. I found him in the sociology section of all places, pushing a squeaky cart of books. He was older than in his university photos, thinner, with a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The fire of the visionary had been banked to a low, cynical ember. I approached him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was holding a 3-ring binder, stuffed with my business plan, my research, my napkin sketches. It felt ridiculously inadequate. "Dr. Kaplan?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned, his eyes flicking over me with a complete lack of interest. "Yes? My name is Lyndon Vance. I was hoping I could talk to you for a moment, about an educational project." A flicker of something, annoyance, pain, maybe both, crossed his face. "I'm not a professor anymore, miss. I just put the books away. You want a book on education? It's Dewey Decimal 37. He started to turn away. "No, please," I said, my voice stronger now. I stepped in front of his cart. "I read about your work, the bridge program at Northwood. I know what happened." That got his attention. He stopped and really looked at me for the first time. His gaze was sharp, dissecting. "You've been doing your homework." "I've been doing more than that," I said, holding out the binder. "I've been building something, and I need help from someone who understands why it matters, and why it's so easy for it to get stolen." He stared at the binder, then back at my face. He looked exhausted, like I was the 10th dreamer to approach him that year. "Listen, kid, I'm going to save you a lot of heartache. The world doesn't want your big ideas. It wants marketable products. It wants profit margins. Go home, get a stable job, don't end up like me." He tried to push his cart past me, but I didn't move. The memory of my aunt's laugh gave me a stubborn strength. "No," I said, "I'm not going home. I've already got the stable job. It's why I know this is necessary. I have a business plan, financial projections, and a working prototype. I'm not just a dreamer." I opened the binder to my most detailed section, the accreditation pathway. "This is where I'm stuck. This is what you know. I'm not asking you to build it for me. I'm asking you to guide me, so I don't make the same mistakes you did." He was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the pages. He saw the neatly organized tabs, the handwritten notes in the margins, the sheer volume of work I had put in. He saw that I wasn't just bringing him an idea, I was bringing him proof of my dedication. He let out a long, weary sigh, a sound that seemed to carry years of disappointment. "Meet me at the coffee shop across the street when my shift ends at 5, he said, his voice gruff. "And bring the binder." He paused, looking me straight in the eye, his expression hard as stone. But let's be clear. I'm not your friend, Ms. Vance. I am your advisor. My payment will be seeing this succeed where I failed. Do not waste my time. Dr. Kaplan was not a gentle mentor. He was a ruthless editor, a merciless critic, and the best teacher I ever had. Our first meeting at the coffee shop was a massacre. He took a red pen to my business plan and bled all over it. He circled entire paragraphs with scathing notes in the margins. Vague, unrealistic projection. Where is the data to support this claim? He ripped apart my assumptions, questioned my logic, and exposed every single flaw in my thinking. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like I'd been through a verbal hurricane, my meticulously crafted plan in tatters. But I wasn't discouraged. I was energized. For the first time, someone was taking my idea seriously enough to tear it down to its foundations. He wasn't patting me on the head and calling my plan a little hobby. He was treating it like a real, serious venture. So I went back to my tiny apartment and rebuilt it. I spent a week hunting down the data he demanded, recalculating my financial models, and rewriting every vague sentence until it was sharp and precise. That became our routine. We'd meet 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes in the hushed, dusty stacks of the library after his shift, sometimes in loud, chaotic coffee shops where we had to shout over the hiss of the espresso machine. We had video calls at odd hours, my face illuminated by my laptop in the dark, his by a single lamp in what I assumed was his home. All the while, I was still working my shifts at the diner. My life became a frantic, exhausting blur of waitressing, studying, and building. The tangible struggle was real and relentless. I lived in a constant state of low-grade anxiety about money. My 15-year-old sedan, which I'd lovingly nicknamed the Stallion as a joke, finally gave up the ghost. It died with a shudder and a puff of black smoke in the diner parking lot. I couldn't afford to fix it. Suddenly, my commute became a 2-hour, 3-bus ordeal. I remember one rainy Tuesday. I was running late to meet Dr. Kaplan. I missed a connection and had to wait 20 minutes in the pouring rain, my binder clutched to my chest inside my thin jacket. I showed up soaked and shivering, but I was there. He just looked at me, gave a single sharp nod and said, "Let's get to work." There was a time I came home to a bright orange notice taped to my apartment door, an eviction warning. I had used a chunk of my rent money to pay a freelance coder from a website to fix a bug in my prototype that was beyond my skill level. I stared at that notice, my blood running cold. For a terrifying 24 hours, I thought it was all over. I thought I was going to be homeless. I ended up selling my television and my microwave and borrowing $100 from Maria at the diner, promising to pay her back with my next paycheck. I paid the rent just hours before the deadline. I didn't tell Dr. Kaplan about any of it. I didn't want his pity, I just wanted his expertise. He pushed me relentlessly on the procedural side of things. "An idea is worthless without execution, Lyndon," he would say, his voice a low growl. "Execution is boring. It's paperwork, it's legal structures. Do the boring work." So I did. I spent an entire weekend learning about the differences between an LLC and a C Corp. I used a cheap online service to officially register Phoenix Initiative LLC. The name came to me one night when I was feeling particularly beaten down. I was rising from the ashes of that humiliating dinner party. The name felt right. It felt strong. I drafted user agreements by studying the terms of service of other websites, piecing together the legal jargon sentence by painful sentence. The most painstaking process was creating the pilot courses. We needed a proof of concept. Dr. Kaplan, using his old curriculum notes, helped me structure the academic writing course. I spent over 100 hours writing the lessons, creating the quizzes, and designing the assignments. I wasn't just the founder, I was the first curriculum developer, the first tech support agent, and the first student testing every module myself. This journey wasn't a stroke of luck or a magical transformation. It was a slow, painful, methodical climb built on a foundation of exhaustion, cheap coffee, and the stubborn refusal to quit. It was earned. After 6 months of relentless, grinding work, we had something real. The Phoenix Initiative was no longer just a plan in a binder. It was a functioning beta website with 3 complete pilot courses. It was still rough around the edges, but it worked. Dr. Kaplan, using a few of his remaining, albeit strained academic contacts, got a handful of people to test it. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. A few small independent educational blogs caught wind of it and wrote short, glowing reviews about this new, scrappy platform aimed at helping the underdog. I remember the first time I saw my project mentioned online. A blog called Ed Access for All had written a small feature. Hometown innovator Lyndon Vance is trying to change the game for non-traditional students with her Phoenix initiative. Reading those words, hometown innovator, felt like a balm on a wound that was still raw. It was the first time anyone outside of Dr. Kaplan had validated my work. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. That small victory, however, put me on the radar. A week later, I received an email from a man named Todd from a company called NextGen EdTech. It was a sleek, venture capital-funded startup known for acquiring smaller companies and absorbing their technology. Todd was slick and complimentary, using words like disruptive and visionary. He wanted a meeting. We met over a video call. Todd was exactly what you'd expect. Young, confident, wearing a branded fleece vest over a crisp button-down shirt. He told me he was blown away by my grit and ingenuity. He said my project had incredible potential. Then he got to the point. "Lyndon, we at NextGen believe in your mission," he said, his smile perfectly calibrated, "and we want to put our resources behind it. We're prepared to offer you $50,000 to acquire Phoenix Initiative LLC, effective immediately." $50,000. The number just hung there in the air. To Todd, it was probably a rounding error. To me, it was everything. It was a new car. It was a down payment on a small condo. It was the ability to pay Maria back tenfold. It was an end to the constant gnawing anxiety about rent and bills. It was a way out. I could walk away from the diner, from the exhaustion, from the struggle. I could be comfortable. I could be secure. My mind was racing. I could take the money and be done. I could prove to my family that my little hobby was worth something after all. I could walk into the next family dinner with my head held high, the secret satisfaction of a 5-figure bank account warming my chest. I'll have to think about it," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Of course," Todd said smoothly. "Take your time. But an offer this good doesn't stay on the table forever." I immediately called Dr. Kaplan. I was breathless, talking a mile a minute as I laid out the offer. I told him what the money could mean. I tried to convince him, and myself, that this was a win. This was the finish line. He listened patiently until I had run out of steam. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, he asked a single, simple question. "Why did you start this, Lyndon?" His voice was quiet, devoid of judgment, but the question cut through all my frantic justifications. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the diner, the truckers, Maria. I thought about the people who, like me, had been told they weren't smart enough, or rich enough, or just plain good enough. I thought about the mission, to build a bridge, not a product to be sold off to the highest bidder. I knew what a company like NextGen EdTech would do. They would take the core idea, strip it of its soul, put it behind an expensive paywall, and market it to corporations. The very people I wanted to help would be priced out. The mission would die. And then, I thought about my Aunt Marcella's smug, laughing face. If I took this money, if I sold out my dream for a quick payday, she would be right. It would prove her point, that everything and everyone has a price. That my ambitions were not a calling, but a commodity. It would be the ultimate failure. They'd shelve it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Or they'd change it until it was unrecognizable. "Yes," Dr. Kaplan said softly. "They would." That was all he needed to say. The choice was suddenly painfully clear. It was a test of my integrity, a fork in the road. One path led to comfort and compromise, the other led to continued struggle, but it was the only path that kept my soul intact. I took a deep breath. I'm turning it down. Writing that email to Todd was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My hand trembled as I typed the words, Thank you for your generous offer, but I will be retaining ownership of the Phoenix Initiative. Every fiber of my being, the part of me that was tired and broke and scared, screamed at me to stop, but I hit send. A wave of terror washed over me, immediately followed by a profound, clarifying sense of resolve. I had chosen the hard path. I had chosen my mission over my comfort. I had chosen myself. The small bit of press from the Ed Access blog did more than attract sleazy startups. It won me something far more valuable, a community development grant. It wasn't a huge amount of money, just $5,000 from a local foundation dedicated to supporting innovative social projects, but it was the most significant validation I had received yet. It came with a small feature in the Sunday edition of the Northwood City newspaper, complete with a slightly blurry photo of me standing in front of the public library. The headline read, "Local Waitress Builds Bridge to Higher Education." I bought 10 copies. I felt a surge of pride so fierce, it almost made me dizzy. This was real. This was happening. I had created something worthy of notice. Of course, I wasn't the only one who read the Sunday paper. A few days later, my mom called. Her voice had that strained, artificial brightness it always got when she was nervous. "Lyndon, honey, I saw the article. How interesting." "Thanks, Mom," I said, my heart sinking a little. I knew interesting was her code for Marcella saw it, and she is not happy. "Your aunt saw it too," she continued, confirming my suspicion. She was a little concerned, that's all. About you, of course. She worries." I gripped the phone tighter. "Worries about what, Mom? That I might actually succeed at something?" There was a pained silence. "Don't be like that, Lyndon. You know she just wants what's best for you. She's a prominent donor at Northwood University, you know. She knows how these things work. She mentioned something about accreditation, about making sure your little project is, legitimate." The conversation ended soon after, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I knew exactly what Marcella's concern meant. It was a threat, and it didn't take long for her to act on it. At the time, I was in the middle of promising negotiations with the continuing education department at Northwood University itself. Dr. Kaplan had managed to get me a meeting with a mid-level administrator who was genuinely excited by the Phoenix Initiative. We were discussing a small-scale trial partnership. It would have been a massive step forward, a huge stamp of legitimacy. The emails had been warm and encouraging. We had a follow-up meeting scheduled. Then, suddenly, silence. My emails went unanswered. My calls went straight to voicemail. A week later, I received a cold, one-sentence email from the administrator's assistant. "After further review, we have decided not to move forward with a partnership at this time." No explanation. No apology. Just a door slammed shut in my face. I was devastated. I knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut, that this was Marcella's doing. She had seen me getting a foothold, a tiny sliver of success, and she couldn't stand it. She had picked up the phone, called a friend on the board of trustees, someone who owed her husband a favor, no doubt, and planted the seeds of doubt. I could almost hear her voice, dripping with false concern. "My poor niece, Lyndon. She means well, but her project is unaccredited, academically questionable. It could be an embarrassment to the university if they get involved." It was so easy for her. A single, whispered phone call was all it took to undo months of my hard work. It was a display of power so casual, so effortless, that it made me feel completely helpless. It felt like I was a child building a sandcastle on the beach, and she was the tide, capable of washing it all away without a second thought. I sat in my apartment, staring at the blunt corporate rejection email, and for the first time since that horrible dinner, I felt truly defeated. It seemed that no matter how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed, I would never be able to escape the long, suffocating shadow of her influence. I called Dr. Kaplan and told him what happened. I expected him to be disappointed, maybe even to tell me that this was the end of the road. Instead, his voice on the other end of the line was dangerously quiet. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with resignation, it was with a cold, contained fury that I had never heard from him before. "So that's how they want to play. he said, the words sharp as broken glass. The same old playbook. The whispers in the halls, the knives in the back. They did it to me, and now they're trying to do it to you. He was silent for a moment, and I could hear the gears turning in his brilliant, wounded mind. I will not let them win again, Lyndon. Not this time. He took a deep breath. They want to play in the big leagues. Fine, we'll buy the stadium. I had no idea what he meant, but the shift in his tone sent a jolt of electricity through my despair. What are you talking about? For 15 years, I've held on to one contact, he explained, his voice low and intense. One person from my old life, who knew I was wronged and never forgot it. The director of the Oakhaven Foundation. He was my student, my best student. He believed in my work then, and he runs one of the largest private educational philanthropies in the country now. I never called him, my pride wouldn't let me. But this changes things. This isn't about me anymore. This is about the project. He was right. Marcella's sabotage, meant to be a killing blow, had just become our catalyst. It had pushed Dr. Kaplan to play a card he had kept hidden for over a decade. 2 days later, we had a meeting. Not in Northwood, but at the Oakhaven Foundation's gleaming headquarters in a city 3 states away. Dr. Kaplan insisted I go alone. This is your vision, Lyndon. You have to be the face of it. I bought the plane ticket with my credit card, praying it wouldn't be declined. The $5,000 grant money was almost gone, spent on legal fees and server costs. As I walked through the airport, I felt like a complete imposter, a waitress in a cheap blazer pretending to be a CEO. But when I walked into that boardroom, something shifted. The room was intimidating. A long glass table, panoramic views of the city, and a panel of serious-looking foundation executives, including the director, a man named Marcus Thorne, no relation to my aunt, thankfully, who greeted me with a warm, intelligent smile. I looked at their faces, and I didn't feel like an imposter anymore. I felt like Lyndon Vance, the founder of the Phoenix Initiative. I didn't just present a project. I didn't talk about my feelings or my family. I presented a fully realized, data-backed, scalable solution to a national educational crisis. I used the charts Dr. Kaplan and I had spent sleepless nights perfecting. I laid out a clear, ambitious 5-year plan for national expansion. I spoke with the passion of my mission, but it was backed by the cold, hard facts of my research. I wasn't the nervous girl from the dinner party anymore. I was an expert in my field, a field I had created for myself. When I finished, the room was silent. I held my breath. Marcus Thorne looked around the table at his colleagues, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "That was extraordinary. They didn't just offer me a grant. They offered to become the primary founding partner. They saw the potential not for a small community project, but for a nationwide revolution in education. They wanted to invest millions. The number was so large, I couldn't even process it. But there was one condition, a major twist. For an initiative of this scale to have the academic prestige it needs, Marcus explained, it must be housed at, and formally partnered with, a major research university. It gives the entire enterprise immediate credibility. My heart sank. A university, the very institution that had just slammed the door in my face. But before I could voice my despair, I saw a glint in Dr. Kaplan's eye in my memory. "We'll buy the stadium." I took a breath. "I have a university in mind," I said calmly. "Northwood University." The Oakhaven executives exchanged surprised looks. "Northwood?" one of them asked. "They have a reputation for being traditional, a bit stuffy. Which is precisely why they need a program like this to bring them into the 21st century, I countered, channeling Dr. Kaplan's strategic brilliance. And their location is perfect for our pilot expansion. What happened next was a masterclass in negotiation, guided by Dr. Kaplan over the phone. The Oakhaven Foundation's donation was so massive, so game-changing, that Northwood University couldn't possibly refuse it. It was the kind of gift that gets buildings named after you, but the deal was structured with surgical precision. The university would not be acquiring my project. They would be the host. The millions of dollars would flow through them, but the intellectual property, the brand, the entire program would remain the sole property of my company, Phoenix Initiative LLC. The legal documents were clear. Northwood University was the prestigious venue, but I was the one who owned the show. I was, in legal and financial terms, the founder. The entire deal, from the massive financial commitment to the structural details, was signed under a strict, ironclad non-disclosure agreement. No one at the university, aside from the president and the chief financial officer, would know the identity of the Phoenix Initiative's founder until the official public announcement. And that announcement was scheduled for the university's biggest, most glamorous event of the year, the annual Founders Gala. In the space of a single afternoon, I had gone from being a rejected nobody to one of Northwood University's most significant and powerful new partners. And nobody knew it but me, Dr. Kaplan, and a handful of people in a boardroom 3 states away. Life, for the next few weeks, was a strange paradox. By day, I was secretly on calls with lawyers and foundation executives, making decisions that involved staggering sums of money. By night, I was still putting on my apron and serving plates of pancakes at the diner. I hadn't quit my job yet. I needed the paycheck, but more than that, I needed the routine. It kept me grounded while my world was tilting on its axis. Then, the invitation arrived. It wasn't sent to my cramped, dingy apartment. It was sent to my parents' house, the one with the mortgage owned by my uncle. My mom forwarded it to me in a plain manila envelope with no note enclosed. I slid the contents out. The invitation itself was a work of art. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind that feels heavy and important in your hand. The lettering was embossed in gold foil. The Board of Trustees of Northwood University cordially invites you to the annual Founders Gala. My heart skipped a beat, and then I saw the names on the invitation, Mr. and Mrs. David Vance. And underneath, in smaller, elegant script, and guest. I was the guest, the pre-ton one, a mere accessory to my parents, who were only invited because they were related to Marcella, a real donor, a real person of importance. My phone rang almost immediately. It was my mother. Her voice was a symphony of artificial brightness. "Lyndon, honey, did you get the invitation?" "It just arrived, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "Oh, good. Well, Marcella was the one who arranged it, of course. She insisted we bring you. She said it would be a good chance for you to see what real success looks like." There was a slight pause. "And maybe you could network a little. You know, for a proper job." A proper job. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. They were inviting the rejected niece, the failure, to an event celebrating the university's most important partners, seeing it as the ultimate lesson in her own inadequacy. They wanted to rub my face in the world I could never be a part of. They had no idea I was about to own that world. A cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. It was one thing to be a secret CEO on the phone. It was another to walk into a room filled with my family and the very people who had scorned me. What if something went wrong? What if the deal fell through? The old insecurities, the ones Marcella had so expertly cultivated over the years, began to whisper in my ear. I hung up with my mom and immediately dialed Dr. Kaplan. My voice trembled as I told him about the invitation and my mother's words. "I don't know if I can do this, Eris," I confessed, using his first name for the first time. Walking in there as their guest, letting them pity me one last time. It feels humiliating. There was a moment of silence on his end. I expected him to give me a pep talk, to tell me to be strong. But his response was different. It was calm, steady, and full of a power I was only just beginning to understand. "This isn't a family ambush, Lyndon," he said, his voice low and firm. "It's not a humiliation. It's your coronation. You are not walking in there as their guest. You are walking in there as the queen, inspecting her new castle before the public knows her name." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They think they're setting a trap for you. In reality, you are the one who set the trap for them. Walk in there and claim your crown." His words were like a steel rod being inserted into my spine. He was right. This wasn't their stage, it was mine. The fear didn't disappear, but it was overshadowed by a new, cold and thrilling resolve. I would go to the gala. I would play the part of the poor, struggling niece one last time. And I would enjoy every second of the show. The night of the Founders Gala felt like stepping into another reality. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns. Champagne flutes clinked like tiny bells, and the low murmur of conversations about stock portfolios and summer homes in the Hamptons filled the air. I had spent a month's savings from the diner on a dress. A simple, elegant, dark blue sheath that didn't scream for attention but spoke of a quiet confidence I was trying to project. I arrived alone, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I spotted them almost immediately, holding court near a massive ice sculpture of the university's crest. My family. Marcella was the center of the solar system, as always, dripping in diamonds that caught the light with every gesture. My uncle stood beside her, beaming. My parents, David and Susan, were there too, looking slightly overwhelmed but sticking close to the source of their social and financial security. And Jasper, my cousin, looked insufferably smug in his tailored tuxedo. Marcella saw me first. A predatory smile spread across her face, and she made a beeline for me, her diamonds flashing. She looped her arm through mine, a gesture that was both possessive and patronizing. It was a physical claim, marking me as her charity case for all to see. "Lyndon, darling, you came," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I'm so glad. It's important for you to see all this." She didn't wait for my response. She steered me towards a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and a kind, intelligent face. "Dean Albright, I'd like you to meet my sweet, struggling niece, Lyndon Vance." I recognized him instantly from my research. Dean Albright, the highly respected, fair-minded dean of the College of Humanities. The neutral observer, the jury. Marcella squeezed my arm. "Lyndon has a little online hobby she's been working on," she said to him, her voice laced with amusement. She then turned to me and winked, a grotesquely conspiratorial gesture. "We're all hoping she finds her footing soon. The real world can be so tough." My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression serene. Jasper sauntered over, a champagne flute in his hand. "Oh hey Laurie," he said with a dismissive smirk. "So, did you ever get that website thingy off the ground? Or are you still just taking coffee orders?" This was it, the moment of maximum humiliation they had engineered. I looked at my parents, standing just behind Marcella. My mother offered me a weak, apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father stared at his shoes, the picture of a compromised coward. Their silence was as loud as it had been at the dinner table all those months ago. But this time, I wasn't the same girl. The fire they had lit that night had forged something new inside me. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I simply turned my attention to the dean, extricating my arm from Marcella's grip. I extended my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dean Albright," I said, my voice perfectly even and calm. "I've heard wonderful things about your work in the humanities department." My composure clearly threw them off. Marcella's smile tightened at the edges. She had expected me to be flustered, to stammer, to shrink under her condescension. She didn't know what to do with this quiet, unshakable confidence. Jasper's smirk faltered for a second. Dean Albright took my hand. His handshake was firm, his eyes observant. He had witnessed the entire exchange. I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Surprise, curiosity, perhaps a hint of disapproval at my family's blatant cruelty. He held my gaze a moment longer than necessary. "The pleasure is all mine, Ms. Vance," he said, his tone polite, but his eyes thoughtful. He glanced from me to Marcella and back again. "Enjoy the evening." As he walked away, I felt a small, secret thrill. The game had begun. My family thought they were in control, parading me around as their failed project. But the most important person in the room had just seen them for exactly who they were. And from across the room for the rest of the cocktail hour, I could feel his gaze on me, a neutral, questioning observer, waiting to see how the story would unfold. The lights in the grand ballroom dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd as everyone took their seats at the lavishly decorated tables. My designated seat was at the far back of the room, at a table populated by low-level administrators and other puo. My family, of course, was seated near the front, at a prime table reserved for major donors. As the waiters began to serve the first course, the main presentation began. Dean Albright walked to the podium on the brightly lit stage. He was a natural speaker, his voice calm and authoritative, filling the vast hall. He spoke of Northwood's proud history, its legacy of excellence. Then his tone shifted, becoming more excited, more forward-looking. "Tonight," he announced, his voice booming through the state-of-the-art sound system, "we are not just here to celebrate our past. We are here to celebrate our future. Tonight, we celebrate a new chapter for Northwood, a revolutionary partnership that will redefine educational access, made possible by the vision and relentless drive of a truly remarkable individual." I saw my Aunt Marcella from across the room. She sat up straighter in her chair, a smug, self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. She subtly adjusted her diamond necklace, preening under the assumption that the dean was talking about a major established donor. Someone like her. She probably thought he was about to announce a new wing of the library funded by her husband's company. She caught my eye and gave me a little pitying smile, as if to say, "See? This is what real influence looks like, dear." The dean continued, his voice resonating with genuine passion. "This partnership is the single largest philanthropic investment in a new program in this university's history. It is an initiative that will build bridges for thousands of students who have been left behind by traditional education. It is, in short, the future." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. I could feel my own heart pounding in my chest. A slow, heavy drumbeat. This was it. "It is my profound honor," Dean Albright said, his eyes scanning the crowd, "to introduce the architect of this 9-figure educational program, and the person our institution is proud and humbled to partner with, the founder of the Phoenix Initiative." Another pause. It felt like an eternity. The room was utterly silent. In that moment of stretched-out time, I could feel the entire trajectory of my life holding its breath. The humiliation, the lonely nights, the hard work, the sacrifices, it all led to this single crystallized point. "Ms. Lyndon Vance." The name echoed through the ballroom. For a split second, there was confusion. The name didn't match any of the usual suspects, the wealthy old money families on the guest list. Then, a single powerful spotlight detached from the stage, swung through the cavernous space, and landed directly on me, at my table in the back of the room. I was bathed in a brilliant, blinding white light. Simultaneously, the giant screen behind the dean, which had been displaying the university crest, flickered to life. A professional headshot of me, taken by the Oakhaven Foundation for their press kit, filled the screen. It was a picture of a confident, smiling woman, a CEO, a founder. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the room. 1,000 heads turned in unison, swiveling to stare at me. And in that moment, my gaze found my family. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. My Aunt Marcella's painted smile was frozen on her face, but it was a grotesque, unnatural thing. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked on me, filled with a horror that was almost comical. My cousin Jasper's jaw had literally dropped open. The smug, arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a slack, stupid expression of complete disbelief. He looked like a fish gasping for air. But the most profound reaction came from my parents. They both turned a ghostly shade of pale. It wasn't just shock on their faces. It was a dawning, sickening comprehension. The little hobby, the website thingy, the struggling niece they had been too ashamed or too afraid to defend. It was all a lie. They had backed the wrong horse, and the realization was crashing down on them with the force of a tidal wave. Back on stage, Dean Albright was smiling, a warm, genuine smile directed right at me. He had seen the family drama unfold earlier, and now he understood. His expression was one of immense respect. "Miss Vance," he said into the microphone, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Or, As we should be calling you now, Founder Vance. We have a seat for you up here. Your table at the head of the hall is waiting for you. Time seemed to warp and bend. As I stood up from my chair at the forgotten table in the back, a single person began to clap, then another, and another. The applause started as a scattered, hesitant ripple, and then swelled into a thunderous, roaring wave. It was a standing ovation. The entire room, the trustees, the donors, the professors, was on their feet, their faces turned to me, their hands a blur of motion. My legs felt unsteady, but I made them move. I began the long walk from the back of the ballroom to the head table on the dais. It was the longest walk of my life. Every step was a declaration. Every step was a repudiation of the labels they had tried to stick on me. Poor, failure, loser, nobody. My eyes scanned the crowd. I saw him, Dr. Eris Kaplan. He was standing near the side, not in a tuxedo, but in a simple, well-worn suit. He wasn't clapping. He was just standing there, his arms crossed, with tears openly streaming down his face. He caught my eye and gave me a single proud nod. It was a look that said, "We did it. We beat them." The ripple effect of the reveal was instantaneous and brutal. I saw the university trustee Marcella had whispered her poison to. He was staring at her, his face a mask of utter contempt, before turning his gaze to me with a newfound, profound respect. He started clapping louder. My focus, however, was on my family. Their private world, built on a foundation of Marcella's wealth and influence, had just been publicly demolished. Marcella herself was paralyzed. Her mask of benevolent superiority had been shattered, revealing the raw, ugly, and deeply insecure woman beneath. She looked around frantically, but the faces that used to look at her with deference now looked at her with pity or disgust. She was no longer the queen of this social circle. She was a footnote in my story. Jasper looked like he had been physically punched in the gut. His entire worldview, a simple one where he was the designated winner and I was the designated loser, had been turned upside over head. He looked small, diminished, and utterly lost. But the image that will be burned into my memory forever is that of my parents. My mother, Susan, had her hand clamped over her mouth, her body shaking with silent sobs. A single tear of what I knew was not pride, but deep soul-crushing shame, traced a path down her cheek. She was mourning all the times she had stayed silent, all the times she had chosen her sister-in-law's approval over her own daughter's dignity. My father, David, the man who couldn't meet my eyes at the dinner table, now couldn't even lift his head. He stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Their silence, which had once been my prison, had now become their own. I reached the head table. Dean Albright pulled out a chair for me, right between him and Marcus Thorne, the president of the Oakhaven Foundation. As I sat down, I looked out over the sea of faces, my gaze lingering for just a moment on the wreckage of my family's table. I didn't have to say a word. My presence at that table, in that chair, was the only statement that mattered. I had the final word, and it was silence. The month following the gala was a whirlwind of press conferences, strategic planning meetings, and the thrilling, complex work of actually launching the Phoenix Initiative on a national scale. But the final chapter of my revenge story didn't happen in a boardroom or in front of a camera. It happened in a quiet office on a Tuesday morning. My new office. The university had provided me with a spacious, beautiful suite of rooms on the top floor of the Humanities Building, a perk for the founder of the Phoenix Initiative. The main room had a large picture window that overlooked the campus green, where students were walking to class, their backpacks slung over their shoulders. It was a world I had once dreamed of joining, and now, in a way, I was at its very heart. On the polished surface of my new desk, amidst stacks of planning documents and architectural renderings for our new headquarters, sat a single, unopened letter. The envelope was a familiar, elegant cream color. The handwriting was my mother's. It had arrived a week ago. I knew it was filled with apologies, excuses, and pleas for forgiveness. I hadn't opened it. I wasn't sure if I ever would. My victory, I was beginning to realize, wasn't about getting an apology from them. It was about no longer needing one. The door opened and Dr. Kaplan Eris walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee from the campus cafe. He placed one on my desk, a small, comfortable ritual we had developed. He looked around the office, a rare, small smile on his face. "It's a step up from the library stacks," he said. "Just a little," I agreed, taking a sip of the coffee. It was warm and perfect. We didn't talk about the gala. We didn't talk about my family. We didn't need to. That chapter was closed. Instead, we talked about the future. "Student pre-enrollment numbers for the summer pilot are in," he said, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. "They're exceeding our most optimistic projections by 30%. A real, genuine joy swelled in my chest, a feeling more satisfying than any standing ovation. This was the real victory. Not the look on my aunt's face when her world collapsed, but this. The data on a screen that represented thousands of lives about to change. The quiet, profound, and deeply personal satisfaction of building something that mattered. Of seeing the bridge I had imagined on a greasy napkin become a real pathway for people. I looked out the window at the students below, and then back at the unopened letter on my desk. I wasn't the dumb niece anymore. I wasn't the struggling dreamer, or the poor thing. I wasn't defined by their labels or their limitations. I was the person I had fought to become. I was the founder. I was free. My story is proof that the labels other people give you only have power if you accept them. Your real value is determined by what you're willing to build, step by step, when no one is watching. What labels have you refused to accept in your own life? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every one. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming the odds. Thanks for watching.